Hello, and welcome to the second part of my Club 100 preview for the 2022 season. This time it's the sprints, the main headline event of the Club 100 weekend, and the event which will be live streamed by Alpha Live this weekend at Buckmore Park. So, without holding this up any longer, if you saw the first video, you know how the format will work, and we'll head straight over to the lightweight category and discuss the format of the racing on Sunday. Here is the entry list for the lightweight category. Now you will see drivers in red and drivers in black, which I will get to very shortly. But first, the format. The format of a sprint series is 3 heats of random grid positions, so you have no qualifying session, just a little bit of practice before your first heat. The other 2 heats will go straight into rolling up laps and you go straight into the start. Each heat is about 8 minutes long, depending whether you have restarts, where the race director can reduce the time depending on how long it takes to restart a race. The Club 100 sprint days are run on a very tight schedule, and that is why time is reduced in racing if it's needed. You will get a front, middle, and back grid position. So if you're on pole for one, you'll be at the back for the other, and in the middle for the third one. So everyone gets about the same kind of grid position. It's not exact because when we get onto the classes, C1s and C2s will mix, whereas C3 drivers will start from the back of the grid in their own front, middle, and back order. This is to allow rookies or novices to experience Club 100, but not be sort of overawed by being on the front row or holding up other people if they are a little bit nervous on front row and things like that. So it just sort of makes sense to build you into the Club 100 scene. As soon as you're ready, you can move up to C2 if you want to, or compete for the whole year as a C3 for the C3 title. So without further ado, let's head on to the lightweight category, look at the runners and riders, and decide who we think will be contenders in this season's Sprint Championship. Looking at the list, first name on there is Ed Barz. Now, Ed is a 2-time champion already in Club 100 and just missed out to Jack O'Neill this season, who isn't attending Buckmore Park. Whether he'll be at any other rounds, that's down to the entries that he's placed, if any. Ed Barz won the championship in 2019 and 2020 when he went on a complete golden run of karting. You saw a karting event, he was at it. British 24 Hours, Club 100, the UKC. Yeah, you name it, he was probably there. In 2021, he finished second to Jack, as we mentioned, but had 15 heat wins and 2 overall victories. Now, 2 overall victories isn't quite the standard we had got for the last couple of years from Ed, so that was a bit of a surprise. But Jack was on a massive run of form, and to get 15 heat wins in a season is still pretty impressive. Ed Barz will certainly be a contender in this year's championship. There's no doubt about that. Next on the list is Daz Teal. Now, Daz Teal has been around Club 100 for a number of years, racing in the Premier Class, Endurances, you name it, he's raced at Club 100. Daz finished third in last year's championship with 6 heat wins, and I think most impressively was his 3 wins in a row in the A finals at the back end of last season. I think it was Wilton, Buckmore, and Bayford. Absolute renowned form there by Daz Teal, and I think it was about 18 months before that was his last victory before that. So it was 18 months of waiting and then 3 come along at once. Daz is a driver who isn't the outright quickest, but always on the ball when it comes to taking advantage of things, clever in his racing, and is a driver you cannot underestimate at any point, even if he's on a bad run of form, which doesn't happen often. So Daz Teal, if he can keep up his form from last season, remembering he won the opening heat of last year as well, if he can keep that run up, he's certainly going to be up there in the top 3 at come the end of the season. Next on the list is Mike Coppin. Now, Mike has been part of Club 100 for a few years after moving over from you know where, and he has been a character in the paddock. Everybody knows who Mike Coppin is, and he's I want to say attraction to penalties. It's not. It's mainly not his fault. Just things, wrong place, wrong time, and stuff like that. But Mike finished 5th in the championship with 12 heat wins. Now that goes back to my previous point. 12 heat wins. Daz only took 6 and beat him by 2 places in the championship last year. So Mike needs to just get to a stage where those little errors or a little bit of over exuberance maybe, or I can't exactly put my finger on why this seems to happen, but that odd penalty, maybe it's knocking over a cone, maybe it's just a move that's a little bit more forceful. Because I want to make it clear he's not a dirty driver. It's just these things happen and they get picked up. So I don't know what it is with Mike, but if he can cut that out this year, he's guaranteed top 3 contender. No doubt about it. It's just, if you look at his championship from last year, I'll just bring it up on my screen. He was really good. Then the second half of the year was where the majority of his drops came in. And it was pretty much either a top 3 in a heat or a final or a drop score for the second half of the year. Amazing consistency for the top 3s, but then them odd races just dropped him down a little bit. Maybe it was a cone penalty or something like that. And he just needs to, try and maybe think twice about making a move if it needs to. But it's something we all have. We all get to that. We all do that sometime in our racing, and it's just a personal opinion of mine. If Mike can cut out the odd penalty he picks up, then he's going to be up there in the top 3, because last season he finished 5th. The pace is there. Next on the list is Josh Adams. Now, Josh Adams and Reese Pope are the next 2, sorry. Both young drivers, both drivers who have recently come into Club 100. I believe Reese, was it Reese or Josh may have raced in the juniors? Maybe not. But they come through in the lightweight category and have been a revelation. Reese in C2 last year, finishing 2nd overall behind Peter Knight, who was, again, from the junior category, but a revelation in his racing, almost winning outright at Wilton Mill one of the rounds. Josh Adams, again, very strong driver. 2 heat wins for Reese, 7 heat wins for Josh. But Josh had that run of dropping a lot of scores around 3 and 4. So he obviously had a bit of a dip in form there and then picked it up as the season went on. So if he can drop that, I'm just having a look at it now. He finished, he actually counted the score of 2 heats out of rounds 3 and 4, and the finals got dropped and the heats got dropped apart from that. So that little dip over in a couple of rounds maybe cost him a good shot at maybe passing Steve Hicks in front of him, who had to miss a round, I think possibly because of work, but he could have challenged that little bit higher without that little dip in form. Reese Pope, most of his drops were in the first half of the year. Keep that form going from that second half of the year, and he is right in with a chance. That includes in the final round, finishing second, and 1st in his heats, and finishing 5th overall in the final. So the form's there. He's just got to keep that going into 2022. Further down the list, you can see Fraser Brunton. Now, Fraser had to miss a few rounds last year due to schoolwork and exams, and he's gone up into university and he races in the UKC now. But last season, he had to miss a few rounds. I'm just trying to see how many he did. He missed 4 rounds overall, but 7 heat wins left him 17th in the championship. So that shows you what he can do already. Already got the experience of Butmore this year with the BUKC. That was only a couple of weeks ago, so that's obviously an advantage. So Fraser, if he can put the whole season together, depending, because obviously university might get in the way, he will be up there contending for the top 5, if not the top 3. Very good driver on his day, and just needs to knock on that door and get that a final victory first, and that will boost his confidence no end. There's 2 other C1 drivers at least I can mention on this video. Oliver Allwood returning to Club 100 after a stint away, so it'll be interesting to see whether he does the whole year. And also Ashley White. Now Ashley mega quick on pace, 1 heat win last year, 20th in the points, but he even worse than Mike. Sorry, Mike, but even worse. Ashley was, I think, the top scorer in the penalty system last year. We tried to keep count of the amount. I don't think it was the most penalties. I think it was the most positions dropped due to penalties. So whether that may have been a disqualification or where you drop 20, I don't know. I can't quite remember how it all worked out. But Ashley just if you cut that out, you are guaranteed top 15 in the championship. The pace is there, and that just needs to calm down. I think he did towards the end of the year. I think a lot of the penalties were kept at the start of the year. Calm it down. You will be there. And it's something we all pick up, as I said before. We get to a stage where we seem to get involved in everything, and then we calm it down, and then the results start coming, and it all makes sense after all. So Ashley White will be looking to do that this season and possibly push into that top 10 of the championship. As always, the Class 2 is normally the largest amount of drivers in the Club 100 fields. So with the lightweight category, there's a huge amount of drivers we can mention to be contenders off that list, and that's not including drivers who aren't doing round 1. So I can only go off that list and go off who I think might do quite well, and I will obviously maybe do another video later on if other people join the championship challenge. First on my list, and first on there, Chris Harris. Now, not a lot of people know about Chris Harris, but I don't know a huge amount, but it's not the guy from Top Gear. It is a driver who has experience in, I believe, Rotax karts. I've seen a couple of pictures and things like that. So if he's got that experience to bring back into Club 100, there's a great chance of him pushing on in the C2 category. But we've seen it before. We have seen drivers join Club 100 from that kind of category and struggle a little bit because it is different. It is, while you say it's a Rotax engine and everything like that, it is a different kind of racing to own a driver. So we'll wait and see how Chris does. There's 2 C3 drivers moving up to Class 2 this year. One is Amy Breacher, who is from the C3 category moving up. I think she finished 2nd or 3rd last year. Slowly improved as the year went on. Experience came into it, and I think she'll just build on that experience this year. Obviously, the advantage is they don't have to start from the back of the grid. So Breacher will be moving forward in this order of points and very committed to her karting and looking to extend that progress and hopefully contend in the top 5 of heats. I think if she can get to a stage where she's getting consistently top 10 in heats, that is a great result for her throughout the year. The other driver from C3 last year is Sam Esri. Now, Sam dominated C3 last year, and coming into C2 this year, I expect the progress will be very similar. He was very quick. He was up in the top 10 quite often. I seem to remember him doing it quite well in slippery conditions as well. So that's something that sort of rookie drivers kind of struggle with every now and again, but he didn't seem to struggle that much. So be interesting to see how he gets on now he hasn't got to start at the back of the grids. Another driver who has come from C3 the year before and had 1 year of C2 experience is Greg Smith. Greg finished 22nd overall and 10th in class last season. Slowly progressing, always willing to listen and learn. He is, and he keeps it relatively clean as well, which always helps. You don't see his name come up often on a penalty board for knocking over a cone. Very consistent, anything like that. So that will help his progression. And with the years' experience, 2 years' experience of Club 100 behind him, there's no bounds for his progress to take off this season and maybe push himself forward into the top five of the championship. But we will see. It just all depends on how the first few rounds go and whether he can make that progression upwards. But as I say, the C2 group is very big this year, and it's going to be interesting to see who can compete at the front of it. Another driver we mentioned on the previous video is Stephen Westwood, a driver who seems to suit the longer races more, but keeps cracking on with these sprint races. And if he can find his form from about 2 years ago, this season, he is a contender for the C2, no doubt about it. I remember him popping in as a guest into Clubman event and doing really well. So if the speed's there, that's not a problem. It's just whether he can find that consistency again. But we mentioned that in the previous round video, so I won't go too much into Stevens racing. Got to say as well, Keith Segal back on the list. Welcome back to Keith Segal, and I don't think there's ever a list without your name on. So keep going, make progression up as he does every single year, and just enjoys his racing. It's great to see Keith on the grid every single time. I swear he's going to get a really old suit out one day and we're all going to be like, that suit's older than us. But Keith, keep racing. We love seeing you out there. Driver 53 is Dan Sega. Now, Dan finished fourth in the championship last year, and with only Pope returning from ahead of him with Peter Knight and Alistair Irvine not on the entry list for Butmore. They might do later in the year, we'll see. Dan's got to be pushing for the title this year. Been a very good driver throughout the last couple of years, and I think he's definitely could take that step and take the championship this year in C2. He's very quick, gets the results. Fourth in the championship, 12th overall, shows a lot, beating a lot of C1 drivers while he was at it. So Dan Sega definitely one to watch this season. Another one to watch is Michael Preston. Now, Michael Preston, we will know more from the Club 100 iRacing Championship, where him and Josh Ladd have been hammer and tongs for the past season and a bit. But Michael has progressed in karting as well and is out in the BUKC this season. So the experience, like we said with Fraser, like we said on a previous video with Dante Dylan, it's going to be a progressional thing that he have the experience at Butmore Park in these karts very recently, and that can be an advantage, especially for the opening round. Speaking of Dante Dylan, he's down here as a C2 driver. I thought he might have been a C1 driver this year, but he's if he's a C2 driver, he is guaranteed a championship challenger if he does the whole season. No doubt about it. We spoke a lot about him in the first video, so I won't say too much now, but he's rounding his craft as a racing driver, as a kart driver, and he will be progressing as years go on, and his speed is undoubted. So Dante Dylan, certainly a championship contender. One driver which I have noticed on the sheet is Kevin Schofield. Now, Kevin Schofield, not a name we know in Club 100 that well, but he did race in the Sprint 60s earlier today and did pretty well. So I expect to see him pushing forward in the sprints. Sprints and a longer race format, obviously different. We'll see, but the pace is there. Is the racecraft for a sprint race? We will find out tomorrow morning on the Alpha Live feed. The next driver I can mention is Elliott Alt. Now, Elliott is Carson's son, Carson, who we see in the pit lane very often. Now, Elliott is very quick and a driver who is progressing very quickly through, I won't say junior ranks because he's sort of at age where he can do both, but I think he's entered the junior category as well. So this will be a good experience for him, and he will be. I wouldn't expect to see him challenging for wins or anything like that, but he will be progressing his craft each time he goes out onto the track. Drive for a pace car normally, he's used to a slot, so he knows exactly what he's doing. The other driver I'll mention, and the final driver, is Dan Groscott. Now, to you guys at Club 100, Dan Groscott might not be a name you know, but I've known Dan for a few years from other series, and he is a quick driver. Mainly, I don't think he has raced too much in outdoors lately. I think he's been a lot of indoor stuff. Possibly been down for an open race at Tamworth or something like that. But Dan is a decent driver, clean driver, so it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. I wouldn't say he's the fastest driver in the West or anything like that. Well, Stoke's not in the West, but anyway, he's not the quickest driver in terms of outright pace, but the experience will build, and he will be looking, if he's doing the whole year, he'll be looking for top fives in heats, certainly by the end of the year, but I think they'll be coming a lot sooner than he probably expects. In the C3 category, it's very hard to judge who will be in which category between 2 and 3, so I can't really predict who I think will win the C3 category. What I can say is there's going to be a big battle in the C3 category. I can see Cameron Williams, who was in there last year. I believe Sam Morris, who is a very good driver, and I think was in C3 last year, might be this year. I think Keith Segal also races in C3. I'm not 100% sure. So there's 3 names before you even start who will be challenging in C3 category. So maybe we'll just get another Samuel Esri into the field, and a new star will be born in the Club 100 field. It's the lightweight class. Now to move on to the heavyweight class. As you can see, entry list above. On this list, the drivers whose names are in black are the C1 runners, the top class. The drivers in blue are Class 2 or Class 3, and the drivers in green are the super heavyweight class. As you can see, Joe Holmes, our reigning champion, will be back in the heavyweight class. Not exactly the news everybody wanted to hear. Joe has been the reigning champion since 2016 when he first claimed the heavyweight championship, and then moved straight into the elite class for the final 2 rounds, where he took victory on his debut in the elite class at Ella Park. Elite class used to be the C1s. So Joe has never been beaten to a sprint title in Club 100. Last season, he won with 19 heats and 6 overall events, and only had 2 seconds counting towards his overall score at the end of the year after the drops. He actually dropped 3rd places. That's how consistent he was throughout the year, and how strong you have to be even get close to Joe, never mind beat him. He's got to be the favourite yet again for the 2022 crown. Somebody who might have a word to say about that is Anwar Burr-Smith. Now, Anwar, we spoke about on a video before when he got beaten by Dan Brewer in the Sprint 60s on countback. This time, it wasn't on countback, but he did have to play second fiddle. And knowing Anwar, he won't want to play second fiddle for much longer. Anwar, who won the championship in 2015 and 2013 in heavies and premiers, respectively, took 14 heat wins and 2 overall victories near the end of the year to round off second place, but just couldn't close that gap to Joe Holmes. It was probably the first year we've seen Joe really pushed for a title challenge, and Anwar will be looking to take that next step again to get even closer to Joe and hopefully for him beat him. Joe will be hoping that won't be happening. Third in the championship last year was Matt Wellman. He's not on the entry list, so 4th was Adam Wright. 2017 heavyweight champion has never won an A final before last year and finally took his first A final victory. You do question how he ever won that championship in heavies by not winning a final, but he managed to do it. And I think possibly one of the only champions in Club 100 ever to do that. Last season, he took 10 heat wins and 1 A final win, but a slight a mid-season slump. It became some of his drops and he wasn't quite making the top 3 in heats. So a mid-season slump for Adam just cost him that chance of trying to beat Matt Wellman, and he will be looking to nullify that, have a strong season throughout, and maybe just take that challenge to Joe himself. Adam is a driver who's quick enough to and helped Anwar, and the two of them went up with Matt Wellman and challenged Joe, but Joe was just too good at the end of the season with Bayford Meadows. So we'll see. Those 3 drivers certainly will be at the top of their game coming into Butmore tomorrow. Sixth place in the championship last year, and currently a C1 driver. I don't know whether he might go super heavyweight because he was in the Sprint 60 today. Is Alex Pritchard. Alex, who has taken 8 heat wins last season and consistently scored points. But one thing that's really let him down is not getting that A final podium last year. His best position was 1 4th place, as 1 5th place. He needs to try and get into those positions a bit more regularly, and then he will be challenging the top 5 in the championship. I don't think he can really finish in the top 5 of the championship without scoring podiums, and that's something that Alex will need to go and do. That's that step up for him, which isn't that far away. It is. He is consistently up there, and the amount of time he spends in a Club 100 car, he knows them inside out. So Alex will be certainly a driver to watch if he can take that step onto the rostrum and make that a consistent visit. In the championship last year was Miguel Hall. Now Miguel has been around the club for a while. Or I would say possibly an underrated driver a bit. He is extremely quick. Hasn't always been in sort of elites or whatever, or the top class. It's why that is, I don't know. Maybe it's just the way it fell each year. But Miguel, extremely quick, extremely clean driver. 1 heat win last year, 8 top 3 finishes. But he just needs to get them top 3s more often. It really did start drying up for him last season, and he needs to get back onto that form and put it consistently together, and that means he will finish higher than 8th in the championship. But he's always a driver to watch, because on his day he can be up there and challenging the likes of Joe, Anwar, Adam, etc. He has been on that overall podium before, so watch out for Miguel Hall. If he's on form, there might be no stopping him. Last year's Class 2 champion, Dickie Allen, Richard Allen, will be back in the C1 class this season. Dickie, as he's known around the paddock, C2 champion, 7 heat wins, including all 3 heats were won in the final round, which is, he was a C2 driver, but he won all 3 of his heats. That's brilliant effort to be able to do that. 1 drop score came in after round 6. Now, that was one thing I would say about Dickie. I don't know whether it was a new suit he was still getting used to, but he didn't have the start to the season that everybody expected. And by about mid-season, there's a few questions going, is he going to be able to raise his game enough to try and take this C2 title? I think Alex Pritchard and who else was further ahead? There's somebody else further ahead. I can't remember exactly who. They're not on the entry list this year, but somebody else was further. I think it's maybe Miguel, actually. Or was he class 1? Anyway. But Dickie, 1 drop score in the second half of the year. Absolutely floored it in the second half and pushed on and claimed the title with, as I said, that excellent final round that he had. A driver who, I think it was at Lyd on his first visit, was right up there with Joe and Amwa and whoever else was racing that day. Really impressive around Lyd, but around other circuits equally as quick. So Dickie will be one to watch for certain if he can just get that start to the season right. Before I completely lose all of your interest, there's just a couple more drivers I'll mention from the C1 category. Chris Alcock, Johnny Elliott, and Matt Isherwood could all spring surprises throughout this season. But one to watch from me out of all of them who could spring a surprise is Matt Isherwood. I see him slightly in the mould of Matt Wildman last year, where we know he's quick, but let's see what he can do over a whole season. With that in mind, let's move on to the Class 2 of the heavyweight series. Many drivers here. You can see the sea of blue on that entry list. And we're going to start with Mikey Nichols. Now, Mikey was 4th in class and P10 overall last year. So great effort by Mikey. And he was improving year on year. Slow start to the season, but 2 heat wins by the end of it showed the progress he was making. And Mikey would definitely be challenging for that title this year if he keeps up the improvement he's had. Even threatening a few C1 drivers as they go along, really, because his pace was there last season for sure. Another driver who's on the entry list, who's always about, Steve Bosley. 3 heat wins last year, 5th in class, always a quick driver. Some people may say aggressive, but you know, he's a big softy really, and Bosley will be there and fighting for the Class 2 crown yet again. Another driver in C2 is Kurt Holmes, brother of Joe. I wouldn't say he's as quick as his brother, but I think Kurt can be a challenger for the title. Just needs to cut out the odd aggressive move where he's picking up the odd penalty. But that's what you do in racing. If you go for an aggressive move or you want to move forward in a race, every now and again you're going to get it wrong. But he will, if he can knock that off, then definitely he's one to watch out for in the season. Another driver who might be quick this season is Alex Lammon. Now, Alex has been to Sprint 60 since his last foray into the Sprint series, but he used to be very quick. I remember racing him in heavyweights at GYG a few years ago, and he was right on the pace there. So he's definitely a driver to watch out for. And he didn't do too badly at Sprint 60 either, so possibly come back for the shorter form of the game, shall we say. Steve Lindley is another driver to watch out for. We spoke about him on a previous video, so I won't say too much this time, but Steve will be there or thereabouts on the C2 podium. If he can get in there, get the trophies, I think the confidence that will bring him. You'll be looking at C2 race victories. Dave Pevers and Mike Bodner, 2 Club 100 regulars. Pevers, who come back recently, Mike Bodner, who just has always been around. And also, watch out for Mike Bodner on a wet day. He's absolutely rapid in the wet, and he will be the driver that you want to get your tips from if you're new to Club 100 and want to know how to drive in the wet. Mike, I remember his drive from the B final to win the B final, then drive through to win the A final in heavyweights, I think it was. So he won the pre-B into the A, moved up in the A, pre-A into the A and won that. So he got the experience out there, but certainly was absolutely flying when he won there. I think it was at Clay Pigeon, I remember, back in 2017. So watch out for Mike in the wet, but in the dry, he's no slouch either. Class 3 is really hard to judge, as always. We don't know what newcomers may come in or anything like that. But 2 names I do recognise from the class last year is Dan Giles and Jaden Carrigan. Now, Dan, I mentored or at least spoke to when he made his debut, and he has progressed slowly but surely up through the finals. I think he's made the B final a couple of times, so certainly a driver who may be able to improve. I'm only presuming he's going to be C3 this year. We'll find out when the championship comes out after tomorrow. Jaden Carrigan, driver who has improved every single time he's got in the car, only by a bit each time, but it's slow progression, and he is building a consistent B final appearance as well at times, and mightily impressed with him. I remember back to, and I don't think you'll mind me saying this, I remember back to when I was doing heavyweights at Glannygores just for a bit of fun, and I said to him, follow me in qualifying, and I'll follow you first, learn where you're struggling, I'll be able to tell you when we come in, and then you can learn from me in front. And he followed me, and I think I left him after about 3 corners. Now we're talking 2017 then, but that shows you the period of time he's improved and moved forward. He hasn't made every round since then, but he's slowly moved forward, and he's definitely a driver to watch for a C3 category this year, if not C2 if he's moved up. Last but not least is the super heavyweight category. Now the super heavyweights are going to be in the green colour on the sheet next to you. Looking very quickly at that, saying that Alex Pritchard isn't a super heavyweight because he isn't on this list, so we'll go with that for now. Looking at the names on there, reigning champion Bill Taylor is back, who is really, really quick, really clean driver. No disrespect to everybody fighting him last year, but he did deserve that title. Bill Taylor was really quick. Lee Henderson, guy who took the challenge to Bill Taylor, is back as well. So that is another driver we'll have to watch out for. Another name on this list is James Taylor. Now, whether it's James Taylor we know, I don't know. It just says James Taylor. But if it's a James Taylor who regularly races in Club 100, we know his pace. We know how he drives in terms of the speed. So we don't need to go into it. But if I was picking somebody out of the super heavyweights for the championship, and a driver who, if the drivers did all the series, I'm looking at that list and saying it's a fight between James Taylor and Bill Taylor this year. So start engraving Taylor on the trophy. Bookmore is fast approaching, and I've named all my favourites and my ones to watch for the season ahead in the sprint categories. If you've enjoyed this video, click subscribe and click the like button below. And if you have any comments about the video, please leave them, because this is my first couple of videos that I've ever done, and I'm looking to improve them the most I can. If you want any more Club 100 themed videos, let us know in the comments below, and we will try our best to produce what we can. I hope you've enjoyed the previous video as well, which is the Sprint 60 and Endurance preview. Hope you get to watch this before lights out tomorrow, and have fun at Bookmore Park for round 1 as the Club 100 2022 season kicks off in style. Remember to watch live on Alpha Live, on YouTube, on Facebook. The coverage will be there, and we'll be watching alongside the commentators of Andrew Maffer and Howard Mitchell from Double Dash Motorsport Media. But for now, goodbye.